The alarm hit before I even reached the lower deck, and I knew something had gone wrong in the specimen hold. My name is Daniel, and I am the cook on board the survey ship Halden Star. I make food for scientists and engineers who spend months away from home, and normally my biggest problem is running out of onions. That night, my biggest problem had 6 limbs, claws like blades, and a jaw strong enough to bend metal. We were carrying a live creature called a Threll Ridgeback, captured on a distant world for study. The science team called her 6, because she was the 6th animal caught that season. She was kept in a reinforced crate in the lower hold, sedated for the journey so she would not panic in the small space. That plan fell apart the moment our ship passed through a rough jump in space. The machine that kept her calm lost power for several minutes, and by the time it came back online, she was already awake, confused, and terrified. I was 2 decks below the kitchen, carrying a crate of vegetables that had been stored in the wrong place, when I heard a sound I will never forget. It was a long, sharp scrape of claws against metal, followed by a deep, rattling growl that shook the walls. I should have turned around. Instead, I walked toward the noise, because curiosity has never once been my strong point. When I reached the hold, I found 4 members of the medical team standing behind a thick glass window, watching helplessly as the creature tore through the padding inside her crate. Dr. Amara stood at the front, gripping a small device meant to release a calming injection from a distance. Her hands were shaking. "She broke the sensor," Amara said, without turning around. "We can't sedate her remotely anymore. Someone has to go in and do it by hand, and no one is getting close enough to try." The containment officer, a tall man named Gareth, shook his head firmly. "That thing is 2.5 meters of muscle and claw. It smells fear before you even feel it. Sending anyone in there is a death sentence." I stood at the edge of the group, still holding my crate of vegetables like an idiot, and I watched through the glass as the creature slammed her body against the crate wall again and again. Her chest was heaving. Her eyes were wide, not with anger, but with something closer to panic. She was not attacking. She was trying to escape something she did not understand. Then she stopped. She turned her head toward the door, toward me, and went completely still. Every hair on my arms stood up. I did not move. "She's looking at him," Amara whispered. "She smells his fear," Gareth said quickly. Everyone stepped back from the window. "No," Amara said, studying the creature closely. "Look at her posture. She's not tensing up. She's calming down." I realized, slowly, why. Everyone else in that hold had been standing there for the better part of an hour, sweating, breathing fast, terrified for their lives. Their fear had filled the room like smoke. I had just walked in a moment ago, annoyed about vegetables, completely unaware of the danger. I was the only person in that hold who was not afraid, simply because I had not yet understood what I was looking at. That realization should have made me more careful. Instead, for reasons I still cannot fully explain, it made me set the crate down. "Daniel, don't," Amara said, but there was something in her voice that was not quite in order. It was closer to a question. "She's not going to hurt someone who isn't threatening her," I said, though I had no real proof of that beyond a hopeful guess. I opened the small side door into the hold, keeping my hands open and away from my body. The air inside smelled sharp, like ozone and torn metal. Six's eyes locked onto mine the moment I stepped through, and for a long, terrifying second, neither of us moved. Her body was massive up close, far bigger than the glass window had made her seem. Ridged plates ran down her back, and her claws, resting against the floor, were each longer than my hand. Her breathing was fast and shallow, her sides rising and falling in quick, uneven bursts. She looked less like a monster and more like something cornered, something desperate. I kept my voice low and steady, the way I do when I am trying to calm a pot that is about to boil over. "I know none of this makes sense to you," I said quietly, taking one slow step forward. "You woke up in a box, in a strange place, far from everything you know. That would frighten anyone." She did not attack. Her ears, or whatever the flexible ridges along the sides of her skull were, turned toward the sound of my voice. I took another step, then another. Behind me, I heard Gareth swear under his breath and Amara tell him to stay quiet and still. When I was close enough to touch her, I stopped. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, but I kept my voice calm. "I'm not going to hurt you," I said. "I promise." She leaned forward, slowly, and pressed her massive head against my chest with enough force to push the air from my lungs. Before I could react, one long claw hooked through the collar of my coat, gripping it tightly, pulling me closer instead of pushing me away. She was not attacking me, she was holding on to me. "She's bonding to him," Amara said from the doorway, her voice full of disbelief. "That's a stress response. She's treating him like an anchor." "Great," Gareth muttered. "Now get the sedative ready before that anchor gets crushed." Amara moved carefully into the hold, holding a long injector designed to be used from a safe distance. Every step she took made Six's grip on my coat tighten, and the low rattling growl started again, deep in her chest. The vibration passed straight through my body. "She won't let you get close," I said through gritted teeth, trying not to move. "I know," Amara said. "Just keep talking to her. Whatever you're doing, it's working." So I kept talking. I told Six about the kitchen upstairs, about how bad the recycled vegetables tasted, about how none of this was fair to her, about how I understood being far from everything familiar, even if my reasons were nothing like hers. None of it mattered in meaning. It was the sound that mattered, low and steady, proof that the room was not filled with danger anymore. Slowly, carefully, Amara moved into position at an angle Six could not easily reach with her free claws. My arm had gone numb from how tightly the coat was twisted around it, but I did not dare pull away. "Ready?" Amara whispered. "Do it," I said. The injector hissed softly, barely a sound at all, but I felt Six's entire body flinch. For one horrifying moment, her grip on my coat tightened even further, the claw digging in hard enough that I thought the fabric would tear straight through. Then, slowly, her breathing began to slow. Her massive head grew heavier against my chest. The growl faded into something closer to a low hum, and finally, into silence. Her claw loosened, degree by degree, until it slid free entirely, and her body settled onto the floor in a controlled, gentle collapse. The medical team moved in immediately, checking her pulse, her breathing, confirming she was simply asleep and not harmed. I stood there for a moment, completely still, staring down at the sleeping creature, who moments ago had been terrified enough to nearly crush my ribs out of pure instinct. Gareth let out a long breath and looked at me like I had grown a second head. "You do realize that thing could have torn you apart in half a second, right?" "I'm aware," I said, my voice shaking now that the danger had passed. Amara knelt beside Six, running a gentle hand along the ridge of her back, checking her vitals one more time. "Her stress levels dropped the moment you walked in," she said, glancing up at me. "Not when the door opened, not when I got close, when you did." I looked down at my coat, torn and stretched from where her claw had held on so tightly. When the medical team finally moved Six onto a stabilized transport frame, they had to carefully cut the last threads of fabric free from where it had wound around her claw, because even fully sedated, her grip had not fully let go. They let me keep the torn piece of the coat afterward, as a strange kind of souvenir. Over the following days, whenever the science team observed her from a safe distance, they noted the same pattern each time I entered the hold to help feed her or check on her recovery. Her stress indicators dropped, her breathing slowed. She would turn her head toward me and watch, calm and steady, as if some part of her simply remembered. I do not think she loved me, and I do not think this was some grand, deep connection between two different kinds of beings, finding understanding in each other. I think, for a few terrifying minutes in a hold that smelled like fear and torn metal, I was simply the one person in that room who was not afraid. Sometimes that is enough to change everything. When we finally reached the research preserve and handed her over to a proper, permanent home, I stood at the transport bay and watched her walk down the ramp into her new enclosure. Just before she disappeared from sight, she turned her head one last time, looking back toward the ship, toward me, as if checking that I was still there. Then she was gone, into a life far better suited to a creature like her, and I went back to my kitchen, back to my pots and vegetables, carrying nothing more than a torn coat, and a story I doubted anyone would fully believe.